The first time I heard someone mention a 2026 bunker, I was standing in line at a coffee shop. Two men were ahead of me at the counter. Both wore black suits and sunglasses. They looked like something out of Men in Black. "We'll need the updated spec to be ready," one of them said. The other nodded. They spoke the way people do when they're talking about construction schedules or delivery windows. I took my coffee and left, not one to fraternize with the competition. I design underground structures for a living. I don't pour concrete or operate heavy equipment. At least I don't anymore. I sit at a desk and draw things that other people build. Rooms, corridors, reinforcement layouts, mechanical systems, access points, and it's technical work, precise work. People imagine bunkers as dramatic places, thick steel doors, warning lights, something that looks military. In reality, most of them look like basements that keep expanding. And for a long time, that's all they were. Storm shelters, safe rooms, panic rooms. People wanted a place to go during fires, tornadoes, break-ins. Somewhere solid, somewhere quiet. Then the projects started changing. Around the same time, stories about wealthy people building underground started appearing more often. The most visible example is Mark Zuckerberg. Public reporting showed that his property in Hawaii included a large private compound with an underground component connected to it. Planning documents referenced reinforced concrete, controlled access points, and independent systems. When reporters asked about it, he described it as a storm shelter. "Just being prepared," he said. And most people accepted that and moved on. In my line of work, no one did. Because the scale of that project, it wasn't subtle. It wasn't the kind of thing you add as an afterthought. But Zuckerberg wasn't the only one. Sam Altman has talked publicly about preparing for worst-case scenarios. In interviews, he's mentioned having a reinforced basement and personal contingency plans. He hasn't framed it as fear. He's framed it as planning. Jeff Bezos doesn't talk about it much at all. But reporting around his properties has described estates designed for isolation, privacy, and self-sufficiency. The language, it's always very careful. Secure, private, hardened. Nobody ever says the word bunker. And then there are the cases that don't make headlines. I've heard stories from contractors and consultants about wealthy buyers purchasing large parcels of land in remote areas. Not vacation homes, not ranches, just land. In New Zealand, there have been publicly documented cases of foreign buyers attempting to build underground structures under agricultural or storage permits. From the surface, the properties looked ordinary. Underground, the plans were extensive. In the Midwest, former government missile silos were sold decades ago. Some were converted into private underground residences. You can look it up, it's true. One widely reported example was rebuilt into a multi-level structure with thick concrete walls, internal power systems, water storage, and controlled access between floors. Public coverage focused on luxury features. The engineering documents focused on survivability. In Europe, there are underground residences built into hillsides and mountains, marketed quietly to private buyers. They're described as secure homes. The layouts resemble high-end residences. The supporting systems are complex and redundant. I have worked on projects like these. At first, the jobs were familiar. Storm shelters, reinforced basements, rooms hidden behind false walls. Clients always had a reason ready. Fires, unrest, natural disasters, pandemics. The reasons didn't affect the drawings. Over time, the requests changed. The rooms went deeper. The walls got thicker. The budgets stopped being discussed. Clients stopped asking how long construction would take and started asking when it would be finished. By then, I was working for a specialty firm. They didn't advertise. You found them through referrals. Their portfolio was fences, gates, hardened structures, and buildings designed to keep people out. They brought me in as a consultant. Drafting and review work, nothing sensitive, they said. The first project I handled for them was labeled a secure storage unit. It had redundant power, filtered air, and a sealed internal room with no windows. The second project followed the same layout. The third did too. Different states, different climates, different clients. The similarities were noticeable. Terminology shifted as well. Clients stopped calling them shelters. They called them units. Unit A, lower unit, core unit, service unit. The firm adopted the language without comment. Dates started appearing in internal documents. Operational readiness. Post-2026 access limitations. 2026 rated systems. When I asked what that meant, I was told it was part of a new standard. Nobody explained exactly what that standard was. I kept working. In this field, you're paid to draw what's requested and make sure it meets requirements. Context isn't necessary to do the job. And then one night, a revised set of drawings came through. They were marked urgent, redlined, highlighted. The basic structure hadn't changed, but several systems had been adjusted. Routes altered, layers added, components swapped out. A single note was attached. Apply updates to all 2026 builds. Do not discuss changes unless asked. There was no signature. And after that, I started comparing projects more carefully. Different firms, similar layouts and timelines. Certain features appeared more often, others disappeared. When I asked questions, the answers were still vague or deflected. When I asked one client what he planned to store in a sealed internal room, he said it was equipment. When I asked what kind, he said it wasn't something I needed to know. I started reviewing older plans. Early projects looked simpler. Newer ones included additional systems, additional contingencies, and layers. Nothing in the documents explained why. That was consistent. But I build what I'm asked to build. And more, what I'm being asked to design looks less like a precaution and more like an expectation. The call came when I was in the back of my truck, digging for a tape measure I dropped behind a stack of rolled plans. My phone buzzed twice. Unknown number, Ohio. I answered with my shoulder pressed to the doorframe. "Yeah, hello," I said. A man's voice came through, clean and flat. "Is this Daniel?" "Yeah, it's Daniel," I replied. "My name is Martin Hale," he began. "I was given your name by a colleague. I have a private underground structure on a property south of Cleveland. I want an inspection. Systems, integrity, readiness. Are you available this week?" "Yeah, well, I can be," I began. "How big we talking?" "Large," Hale began. "You come highly recommended. I'd like you to look at it yourself." "All right, well, you got any plans you can send over?" "You'll get everything on site," Hale said. "When you arrive, you'll be met, you'll be escorted, you'll have full access." He gave me an address and a time. 2 days later, 9 in the morning. And the call ended. I stood there with a tape measure in my hand, looking at the screen like it might explain what just happened. I wrote the address down anyway. And 2 days later, I left North Olmsted before 7. I took 71 south and then cut over on smaller roads the way he told me. I passed the usual warehouses, gas stations, diner signs, and then nothing but flat fields and bare trees. There was a point where my GPS showed a blue dot moving through a grid of roads with no name, just numbers. The address got me to a stretch of 2-lane highway with no shoulder. There was no sign, no gate, just a gravel entrance that looked like it belonged to a farmer. I turned in. The drive-in was long, not winding, just long. Straight gravel with a shallow ditch on either side. The property opened up around me as I went. More acres than I could see from the road. Trimmed grass, mowed lines, trees spaced on purpose. I saw the house after a minute. Modern, not huge, but expensive in a quiet way. No decorative stone, no columns, nothing that said mansion. I parked near a detached garage, and a man was waiting by the front steps. Suit jacket, white shirt, no tie, hands in front of him like he'd been standing there longer than necessary. He walked down to meet me. "Daniel," he said. "Yeah, that's me." Martin Hale shook my hand once and let go. "Thank you for coming. I appreciate you making the drive." Yeah, no problem," I said. "Well, you said this was an inspection. You want me to treat it like a commissioning walkthrough?" "Yes," Hale said. "We want confirmation that what was built matches what was specified. We want confirmation the systems perform as intended. This way." Inside, the place was quiet and cold. No TV, no music, no smell of food or cooking, no shoes by the door. Nothing on the walls besides one landscape photo that could have been bought in a hotel lobby. Hale didn't offer coffee or water, didn't ask about my drive. He walked me down a hall and opened a door that looked like a closet. Behind it was a stairwell. The stairs were concrete, wide enough for two men side by side. A handrail bolted cleanly into the wall. Recessed lights every 10 feet. Everything sealed, painted, finished. No exposed edges. No rough work. Hale stepped down first. "It's a long way," he said. "Yeah, how far?" "You'll see." I followed. The stairwell didn't go straight down. It ran in long segments, turning on landings. Each landing was the same size, the same angle, the same light placement. It was built for traffic, not a panic tunnel or hatch escape. A real passage people could use daily. After the first minute, the sound of the house was gone. No HVAC hum from above. No floor creaks. Just our steps and the soft noise of air moving behind the walls. I glanced up once and couldn't see the door anymore. We kept going. The air got colder, drier. Smelled like concrete and new plastic. Filtered air, it's always got that clean, dead smell, like an office building after hours. I checked my watch without thinking. We'd been walking down for 3 minutes. Hale didn't slow. At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a corridor with a ceiling higher than the one upstairs. The walls were concrete, but faced with panels. Smooth, white, industrial, but finished. The floor was polished, not shiny marble, just sealed concrete done properly. The corridor ran straight for a long distance, with doors along one side, each door marked with a simple label. Unit A, Service, Mech 1. I stopped just inside and let my eyes move over the space. "This is bigger than I expected," I said. Hale nodded. "That's why you're here." I pulled my notebook out, started doing what I always do. "All right, power first. Where's your primary intake and transfer?" Hale pointed down the corridor. "This way." We walked past 2 doors and into a room that sounded alive. Fans, low vibration, a steady mechanical presence that you feel through the soles of your shoes. The room held 2 generators on mounts, both enclosed with sound dampening. Fuel lines ran cleanly. A bank of batteries sat along the far wall, tied into inverters, and a panel that looked like it belonged in a hospital. I looked at the labels, I looked at the redundancy. All right, 2 gens, I said. And this battery bank is not a backup, this is a second system. Yes, Hale said. All right, fuel storage? Hale led me to an adjacent room. Tanks. Not a couple drums. Tanks designed to sit there for years. Filtered intake? Yes. Manual start? Yes. I wrote it down. I moved to the electrical panels. Everything was labeled by zone. Nothing sloppy. No handwritten tape. The work was professional and expensive. This looks like a commercial install, I said. It was. Who did it? I asked. Oh, a firm that understands discretion. I didn't push that. Next, I checked air. Hale took me into an air handling room that was clean enough to eat off the floor. Pre-filters, HEPA, a section labeled with chemical filtration, spare filters stored in sealed packaging, a bypass system that could route around one unit if it went down. How many intakes? 4. Where are they? On the property. Protected. Can I see them? Not today. I wrote that down too. Water came next. Storage tanks, treatment, plumbing that was oversized, redundancy in pumps, a UV treatment unit, replacement parts and labeled bins like a maintenance shop. This is set up for a long occupancy, I said. Hale nodded again. How many people is it designed for? Enough, he replied. I didn't argue with that. I kept moving. The layout kept opening up. There were corridors that branched into living quarters. Not just bunks, actual rooms. Beds, desks, storage, bathrooms that weren't cramped. A kitchen with commercial-grade equipment. A pantry room larger than my first apartment. There was a medical room with sealed cabinets, a table, oxygen and refrigeration units. There was a communications room with hardwired lines, a rack and shielding in the walls. I ran my hand along the paneling and felt how thick it was. Faraday, I asked. Yes, Hale replied. I wrote it down. We passed doors labeled core access and lower unit. The farther we went, the more the place felt like a facility, not a shelter. The ceiling stayed high. The lighting stayed even. The ventilation was balanced. No hot spots, no stale corners. It was well done. Everything about it said it wasn't built for a single storm night. It was built for routine. I checked fire suppression, I checked drainage, I checked the seals around doors. I looked for weak points and found none. At one point I stopped and looked at Hale. How long has this been in use? I asked. It's been tested, he replied. By who? I asked. He didn't answer. He checked his watch and looked back down the corridor. I have something to take care of upstairs, he began. I'll leave you to finish your inspection. He reached into his jacket and handed me a thin access card. All doors you'll need are active, he said. Take your time. I'll come back down when you're done. I nodded. Hale turned and walked away toward the stairwell. His footsteps carried for a while, and then blended into the background noise of the bunker. I stood there for a moment, completely alone in this massive underground space. I continued the inspection the way I normally would. I moved through the remaining corridors, checking door seals, wall thickness, where mechanical cutaways exposed it, and drainage points along the floor. Everything matched the standard of the rest of the structure. The workmanship was consistent. No rushed sections, no retrofits. Several rooms were clearly meant for daily use. Laundry machines bolted into reinforced pads. Storage shelving labeled but empty. A food prep area sized for routine operation rather than emergency rations. I made notes as I went. The lower unit extended farther than I expected. The corridor narrowed slightly, then widened again near the end. The lighting changed in this section. The fixtures were recessed deeper into the ceiling, producing a softer light. At the end of the corridor was a single room. The door was open. Inside, the space was larger than the others and mostly empty. Shelving lined one wall. A work table stood against another. In the center of the room was a low metal podium anchored to the floor. A book rested on top of it. I stopped just inside the doorway. The book didn't match anything else in the room. Wasn't stored or protected. Wasn't labeled. It was just there. I walked toward it. The book was resting flat on the podium, already open to the middle. The pages lay evenly, as if it had been placed that way on purpose. I reached out and touched the edge of the page. The paper was dense, thicker than modern stuff. The edges were uneven and cut by hand. The binding was pale and smooth, pulled tight around the spine. On the front of the book was a skull shape formed as part of the cover itself. It wasn't attached or decorative. I leaned closer and looked at it. The pages were filled with dense text arranged in narrow columns. Diagrams were embedded between blocks of writing, drawn with straight lines and precise spacing. The symbols repeated throughout the page in consistent patterns. Then I noticed the illustrations. They showed figures that didn't resemble human anatomy. Others had horned heads or distorted faces. The drawings were detailed and deliberate, not stylized or abstract. At the top of the page, there was a large number, 2026. I read it again to be sure. The number did not look like it was added later. It was part of the page layout, aligned with the text beneath it. After that, I stopped thinking about the rest of the bunker. I focused on the book. I studied the diagrams, then the figures, then the symbols repeating along the margins. The layout looked structured, like instructions meant to be followed in order. I didn't turn the page yet. I kept my hand resting on the edge of the podium, and I stayed where I was. Finally, I slid my fingers under the cover of the page and turned it. The next pages held only a short block of text. It read, "When ancient vows are cast aside and signs return across the sky, the sealed will rise, the count is tied to 26 when men must die." Below the text was a full-page illustration. A man knelt on bare ground, his knees pressed into the earth. His hands were planted in front of him, fingers spread, weight leaning forward. His head was tilted up. High above him, far into the sky, an angel hovered. It was turned completely away from the man. The wings were extended wide, filling most of the space above, their scale making the figure below look tiny by comparison. The man remained where he was, looking up. The angel remained turned away from him, positioned as if already moving on, with nothing in the illustration suggesting it would turn back. I didn't turn another page. 2026. Finally, I flipped the page. The next one was filled with water. Not the surface, the depth. The ocean was drawn in cross-section, cut straight down from sky to black. Light thinned quickly as the water descended. The upper layers were pale and open. Below that, the lines grew heavier, the shading denser, until the lower third of the page became solid darkness. Something occupied the center of it. The scale was established by comparison. Ships were drawn along the surface line, reduced to narrow silhouettes. One vessel was split open, its hull folding inward. Another was angled downward, stern lifted as if caught by something below. Beneath them, a massive body coiled through the water. It was enormous. Its form bent slowly across the page, thick and armored, each curve overlapping the next. Ridges ran along its length like layered plates. The head rose from the darkness beneath. It was broad and blunt, shaped like a wedge. The mouth opened vertically, split from lower jaw to crown, and inside were rows of short, dense teeth packed tightly together. A single eye was visible on the side of the head, set far back. It was round and pale, fixed forward. The body vanished into the black below, extending beyond the page. And I turned to the next. The water was gone. The next pages showed the sky. The background was left open and empty. No clouds, no stars. Suspended within it were spheres, perfectly round. Some were small, others larger. Each one was drawn cleanly, smooth-edged, evenly curved. Several were shaded a bright blue. One illustration showed the inside of an aircraft cockpit. The windshield framed a blue sphere hovering just ahead of the nose. It was close enough to fill much of the view, glowing evenly. Another showed the same sphere pacing alongside a wing, holding position without drift. More pages followed. Spheres over open water, above farmland, hovering near coastlines. Several illustrations showed a blue sphere descending straight down into the ocean. The surface remained smooth. The water closed behind it, without disturbance. As I flipped through the pages, the images stayed consistent. I thought of pilots interviewed recently on the news, describing objects that matched speed, then just stopped. Footage released quietly. Reports of glowing blue orbs entering and leaving the ocean. The drawings in the book, they matched those accounts very closely. I turned the page. The next section moved underground. The pages showed cross-sections of earth and concrete, layers peeled back to reveal underground structures. Walls, ceilings, rebar, and sealed rooms were drawn in precise detail. Outside those structures were figures. They stood taller than the entrances, measured across doors and access hatches, 10 feet or more. Their bodies were made entirely of bone. Each structure was fused and rigid. Skull shapes were elongated and smooth. Eye sockets were deep. Rib cages curved inward, forming solid frames around the torso. Long arms ended in fused fingers shaped into rigid claws. Several illustrations showed the figures positioned directly against bunker walls. In one, a clawed hand pressed flat against reinforced concrete. In another, a figure leaned close to a sealed door, its skull tilted, as if trying to find a way in. One image showed multiple figures surrounding a buried structure, hovering just above the ground. Wings extended outward and upward. The wings were constructed with interlocking bone segments, it looked like, wide and stiff. Another illustration showed one of the figures gripping a human above ground, lifting it upward. The bunker below remained intact and sealed. None of the images showed the figures inside. Every drawing placed them at the perimeter, against walls and above access points. at entrances that remained closed. I turned the page. There was a massive coiled serpent. Its body was thick and muscular, each loop overlapping the next. Large, smooth scales covered its length. The head was triangular and blunt. Eyes were set forward and wide, shaded a bright red. The mouth was open. Inside, the throat widened quickly, drawn deep and smooth. One illustration showed a human figure halfway inside, legs still visible, arms pinned tight by the coils. Another showed a second figure fully swallowed, the body outlined inside the serpent as it moved downward. The final image showed the serpent alone. Its midsection was thicker. The red eyes stared outward at me. I turned the page. The next section began without illustration. A single word was written at the top, centered and plain. Survival. Beneath it was a short rhyme, set apart from the rest of the text. Keep gold close when the sky turns red. It buys you time. It buys the dead. Silver shines for blood and bone. If you strike alone. I read it once and stayed where I was. Gold to bargain, silver to kill. I thought about the price charts I'd seen lately, the ones that kept showing up whether I looked for them or not. Gold climbing steadily, silver moving harder, faster, spiking in ways it hadn't in years. The explanations were always the same: inflation, debt, central banks, market fear. Those reasons had always been enough before. A few days earlier, a video had started playing while I was working. Somebody talking about gold and silver again. He'd been saying the same thing for years, but this time he was right. He was talking about physical metal, about shortages. I remembered scrolling past it without much thought. But standing there looking at that page, I wondered how many people out there knew what was coming. I thought about the bunkers I'd worked on, the ones that went deeper every year, the ones with storage rooms left empty on purpose, shelving waiting to be filled with something specific. I thought about how the clients had stopped asking why and started asking how soon. Was this why prices were climbing the way they were? Not because of debt ceilings or inflation, but because a small number of people knew there was something much worse coming. Okay, enough. I closed the book and let it rest on the podium. The room didn't change. The bunker was the same as before. Nothing in the concrete or steel reacted to what I just read. Because as convincing as the pages had been, as precise as the drawings were, this was still a book. Just some weird book. Wasn't evidence, wasn't data, it wasn't proof. People had written convincing things before, prophecies, predictions, end-of-the-world timelines. They never came true. We're still here. This was ridiculous. It had to be. A book couldn't explain markets, couldn't explain military sightings or ocean footage or why people with money were suddenly building downward instead of outward. It couldn't explain why the images, why they felt so specific. I told myself it wasn't real, it was just a book. It couldn't be real. But even as I stood there, part of me resisted the thought. Not because I believed it, but because something about it felt different. The pages didn't feel written to convince anyone. They felt written to record something. I shook my head slightly, and I turned away from the podium. "You've read it?" The voice came from behind me. I turned. The man in the suit stood a few steps away, hands folded in front of him, the same way he'd been when I arrived. "Oh, yeah, look, I'm sorry, it was open and—" "No," he interrupted. "It's all right." He didn't sound upset or surprised. "I wanted you to." He looked past me at the podium, then back at my face. "You've seen what's coming." "You mean the story?" I began. "The book? Yeah, I read a few pages. It's creepy, but..." I gestured back toward the podium. "It's a book," I continued. That's all it is." He didn't interrupt me, didn't raise his voice. He just waited until I stopped talking. "Come with me," he began. "I want to show you something." He turned before I could answer. We didn't take the main corridors. He led me through a service passage I hadn't checked yet, narrower than the others, the ceiling lower, the lighting spaced further apart. We went down another set of stairs. This level wasn't finished the same way as the rest of the bunker. The walls were raw concrete, no panels or paint. The floor was bare. The sound of our steps carried farther. At the end of the corridor was a single door. It was steel and reinforced. A small window set into it at eye level, covered by very heavy glass. He stopped beside it. "I'm going to open the shutter," he said. "I wouldn't look for long." He slid a panel aside. Something was behind the glass. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. My brain tried to classify it and failed. Whatever was in that cell didn't move toward the window. It didn't react to us. That made it worse. My chest tightened and my mouth went dry. I felt my hands curl without meaning to. Every instinct I had told me to step back. I did. "That's enough." He slid the panel closed immediately, and we stood there in silence for a moment. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't ask how it got here. I didn't want answers that would stay with me. We went back the way we'd come. When we reached the finished levels again, the bunker felt almost normal by comparison. He stopped near the podium. "I brought you here because I'm not good with things like these. Power, air, water, redundancy. That isn't my expertise." He reached into his jacket and removed 2 objects. Tickets. They were rigid, covered in gold foil that caught the light as he moved them. There was no writing on them except the number 2026. He held them out in his open palm. "You and one other. Choose carefully." He let that sit. "You can stay here, keep the systems running, maintain everything, make sure it works the way it's supposed to," he said. He stepped past me and walked back toward the stairwell without saying another word. His footsteps faded the same way they had earlier. And then I left. The walk back up felt longer than the way down. The stairwell didn't change. Everything felt the same, but different. When I got outside, my truck was where I'd parked it. I got in, shut the door, and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house as I pulled onto the gravel drive. I didn't slow when I reached the road. I followed the same route back the way I'd come, past fields and tree lines and long stretches with nothing on either side. I drove without turning on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't say a word. And that brings us to the present moment. I'm telling you this because I've made my decision. I've accepted his offer. I'm taking my son, Julian, 8 years old. Last night after dinner, I sat down with him on the couch and I pulled one of his books off the shelf, one of the older ones, a picture book with monsters in it. The kind where the creature is always somewhere in the background of the page, half hidden behind furniture or trees, while the story pretends it isn't there. I told him I was going to read it. He leaned against me and watched the pictures while I did. Didn't say anything. Just followed along, turning his head when I turned the pages. When we reached the part where the monsters filled most of the frame, I closed the book instead of finishing it. I told him we were going to be leaving soon. Somewhere different. He looked up at the book, then at me. "Where are we going, Dad?" "Where we'll be safe from monsters," I said. I told him it was a place built to keep people safe. Deep underground. I kept my voice even. I told him he could bring whatever he wanted that fit in one bag. He nodded once, stood up, and went to his room. I heard drawers opening. I heard the zipper on his backpack. When he came back, it was half full, clothes folded wrong, his monster book tucked inside it. I told him we'd leave in the morning, and he went back to bed. After he fell asleep, I stood in the doorway and watched him. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that this was what fathers were supposed to do. The truck is fueled and ready. We'll be leaving soon. I didn't plan to say anything. That was the easiest option. Get in the truck and just drive away. Let the rest of the world figure things out on its own. But I couldn't live with that. I couldn't leave knowing I'd seen what I had seen and said nothing. Knowing I'd been warned in a way most people were not. So this is me warning you. I know times are hard. I know money is tight and friends are harder to come by than they used to be. Talk to the people around you. Your friends, your neighbors, the ones you trust. Band together if you can. Organize. Make a plan that doesn't rely on everything working the way it always has. Pick one place to go. Think about food, about shelter. Think about how you'll protect each other if it comes to that. Don't assume someone else will handle it. And if you're able, get gold or silver, even a single coin. It wasn't framed as advice in the book. It was framed as survival. I don't know exactly how any of it works, and I don't think explanations matter much right now. But maybe preparation will. I have seen the things that are coming. Do what you can. Just do what you can. And get ready. Hey, this is Steven. I just wanted to say thank you for all the support in 2020.